Okay.
Sorry about that, everyone. Hadn't worked out how to unmute myself. Welcome to the Planning Policy Committee. We have no apologies, I believe. We'll go straight through to...
Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Ian Jelly.
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Ruth? Can you unmute, please?
Yes, sorry, Chairman, I was having technology problems. Yes, just my usual one, Chairman of employee of the County Council Library Service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go through the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 12th of October. If there are any issues in relationship to it, please raise them as we go through. Page number 1. Page number 2. Page number 3. Is it your wish that I sign them as a true record? Please show. Your hand is fine.
I wasn't present, Chair, at that meeting.
Thank you. In which case we'll move straight on to first main item. We've got no members of the public wanting to speak, so we can move straight on to item 6. Site-specific Part 2 local plan examination update, which Julia is going to take us through.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the examination of the site-specific Part 2 local plan. Members will recall that at the meeting of this committee held on the 21st of May 2020, members agree that the site-specific Part 2 local plan be submitted to the Secretary of State, and that was subsequently submitted on the 28th of May. This report provides details of the work undertaken and the issues raised through the examination process, and provides members with the next steps in that process. All the work relating to the examination is available to view on the examination pages of the Council's website. So in paragraph 2.3, you can see there that there's a direct link to where all of the information is available. Following submission of the Part 2 plan, Planning Inspector Elaine Worthington was appointed to undertake the independent examination into the soundness and legal compliance of the plan. The inspector wrote to the council in June setting out some initial questions, and the council responded to these on the 3rd of July, providing additional information to the inspector in response to those questions. The inspector then set out her matters, issues and questions relating to the soundness of the submitted plan, which were provided in July. And the inspector set out 14 matters for discussion, which you can see there are listed in paragraph 2.6 of the report. Officers prepared matter statements for each of the matters identified by the inspector, and those statements responded to the issues and questions that the inspector had raised. And matter statements were also submitted by other interested parties. In total, there were 64 matter statements submitted. In addition to that, the council also prepared 4 statements of common ground, which were agreed with participants, and they were prepared between the council and Anglian Water, Armstrong Planning on behalf of Weetabix, Roscon Strategic Land in relation to land at Stoke Albany, and Hanwood Park LLP. The hearing sessions took place over 6 days from the 8th to the 16th of October, were conducted virtually using the Zoom platforms, and those were live streamed on YouTube. The number of participants at each sessions varied. you can see in paragraph 2.9, I've listed the matters which had the highest number of participants, with those being in the region to 6 to 8 participants at each of those sessions. Then following the close of the hearing sessions, the council prepared a list of areas of work identified at the hearing sessions and provided those to the inspector. The inspector then responded to the council's list, providing some further work that she required to be undertaken. And just before Christmas, the council submitted a response to the inspector's action points. You can see in paragraph 2.11 that lists some of the areas of the work proposed and the proposed modifications that were included within that. Part of that included an updated schedule of proposed main modifications to the plan. And then full details of all the amendments which are contained in that schedule are available on the examination web pages as document reference exam 18A. In terms of next steps, paragraph 2.13 advises that the inspector will now review the work submitted by the council in that in document exam 18 and will publish a note setting out next steps in the examination, and that was expected in the coming weeks. The inspector has now provided her interim findings and officers are currently digesting these, preparing to make the document publicly available and agreeing a timetable for responding to the inspector's findings. And this will include further updating the schedule of main modifications to reflect the inspector's findings. The main modifications will need to be consulted upon, and prior to that consultation taking place, it's intended that the main modifications will be reported to a future meeting of this committee, asking members to agree them for consultation. It's recognised that this is the final planned meeting of this committee, so an additional meeting will need to be arranged to agree the main modifications for consultation. At the moment, we anticipate that will be early March. So then finally, the recommendation for the report is that members note the update on the examination of the site-specific Part 2 local plan.
Thank you, Julia. I think a big thank you to you and the team for responding to the very, very detailed questions that have been thrown at you. I had a look at one of the items, and there's some 86 pages of items, which was rather frightening. Does any of the members have any questions on the item at this time? We have Jan who wishes to make a comment. Can you unmute yourself, please, Jan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just Julia, thank you for the report. It's fantastic. And like the chair said, you know, that there was a heck of a lot of questions. Can I just add clarification on 2 points? There's a reference here for, obviously we're in Burton about the Bosworth nurseries, and if you look at Appendix 2 for exam 18, there's a discussion ensued as to whether the application was going to go ahead for the housing, and obviously Sam hasn't found anywhere to relate to, although he might have done. I think it's somewhere in the accounts about 4 miles from here is another site. So why was the inspector concerned about that in terms of, is it because the application or the outline plan and application elapsed in, was it June, I think, from memory, June 2020?
Yeah, the reason the inspector requested that note was through the hearing sessions, one of the participants raised the fact that the planning application had reached its kind of end date, and also through doubt in terms of the delivery of the site. Following on from the hearing sessions, we we contacted the site promoter and put together a note which set out that the permission had been implemented. So we're still live, and set out quite a bit of detail in terms of the timescales for delivery of the site. So yeah, it was in response to comments that were made both in matter statements that were submitted by participants and by participants at the hearing sessions.
Sorry.
Okay, Jan? Do you
Sorry,
have-
Sorry, Chair. May I add one more question kind of following on from that?
Yeah.
Just really about, I think it was 18C, about green space and the protectors. I don't know if you remember, quite a few months ago, I asked the question about how we protect our green space, and I was talking about both and Sam, remember, I asked about space up the wold, so the area that's from the A6 over to where the burial ground is, because we've got two, and how that would impact. And that there is a comment on the green space in here at 18C, is appendix 18, following on from the comment on Bosworth Garden Centre. Just a question really to say, is this plan substantial enough to protect our green spaces? Because the way it reads, it doesn't feel like it is in terms of, do you remember we looked at all the places of historical interest and things like that? And there was a discussion ensued as to what was deemed historical and what was deemed important to local people. And you were going to go back into it and have a look at it.
Is Simon going to respond to that, or Julia?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to take that one. The issue around local green space was one of the more major aspects that was explored at the examination. So it was really quite testing. I think the starting point for the inspector was that she had serious concerns as to whether we had adequately met the requirements for local green space. That then it then ensued that was one of the other major parts that we sought to provide additional evidence post hearings. So that was one bit that caused a bit of delay and resulted in really quite a significant submission to the inspector for consideration. We actually broke it down into individual sites that we had considered through the process, and provided the history and representations that were being made. Now that then forms a part of the inspector's interim findings. So we're currently absorbing the contents of that, and what we're proposing to do is feed back our conclusions to members as a part of the modifications discussions that we hold in early March. So we're not in a position to share with members. We only received the letter on Monday, and it's quite a lengthy, detailed letter that's requiring us to get various aspects of it checked out from the legal point of view. So we're in the process of doing that, and we'll come back to you with something of more substance. But it is for sure one of those sensitive, delicate areas that has been a challenge throughout since submission of the plan and the inspector's initial questions to us.
Simon, can I just say thank you to you and the team, to Julia and that, because the submission you made on the green space is absolutely incredible, and the way you broke it all down and went through all the details in terms of, like you say, the history of it and the accessibility and the criteria and how important these green spaces were. It's just incredible. And I was amazed how much detail you went into, because you've actually listed all the green spaces in all the villages across all the towns, which is absolutely fantastic. So I can only say thank you for the work and the diligence you put into providing the report, because it must have been a mammoth task to pull all those details together. I know how hard it was when we first looked at it, but then to inspector level, incredible. So, hats off to you guys. You've been absolutely amazing what you've put together. Appendix, I don't know how many people have read it, is just massive. It's a huge document, and you guys have put much work into it, so thank you. But it just concerned the depth and the level of work you had to put into that and how intricate it was as to whether that was going to be acceptable, because it seemed to infer that there hadn't, reading between the lines, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to infer that we hadn't actually looked at it, that we'd just taken it as read because they'd always been there. And it looks like from your reply and submission to the inspector that we had to prove that they weren't just there, they were protected, they were valued, and they were necessary, and especially in the world we're living in nowadays. And for however long we have to, it's imperative we protect them and protect them from built on. And so I can't thank you guys enough, because the report you've done for the whole of this, the work that we're agreeing to tonight does not convey the work that's gone into the report that had to go back because of the questions the inspector asked. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. That's much appreciated, and I will feed back to the team. Obviously, Julia's here, and she was the lead on a lot of that work. So yeah, it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Any other comments from any of the other councillors? No? In which case, we'll note it. Can you please just indicate that you are noting the document as it is, and that we're hopefully moving to the next stage in March to a new meeting? Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a unanimous item. The next item is the Kettering Town Centre Area Action Plan Monitoring Update. And I think Simon's going to take us through this. Over to you, Simon.
Many thanks. The purpose of this report, members, is to inform you of the 9th monitoring report, annual monitoring report for the Town Centre Area Action Plan. The plan itself was adopted on the 6th of July 2011 and sets out the aspirations for the town centre up until 2021. The Area Action Plan includes a policy on implementation and monitoring, so that forms the framework for the points contained within this report. Now, I'm not proposing, it's quite a lengthy report. It tends to cover a little bit of the more recent history as to the adjustments and an activity that's gone on or has not gone on within Kettering Town Centre. So I'm not proposing to go through all aspects, but I hope to pull out some of the key elements and some of those elements that have taken place perhaps over the last 12 months or so to give you a bit of a flavour. Obviously, I'll say at this point, and I'm sure I'll make reference to it further, it's been a difficult and funny year for town centres, and I think that's reflected within some of the monitoring data that we've found. So, looking firstly at monitoring objective 1, that's looking at testing the vibrancy of the town centre. So, paragraph 2.8, due to the restrictions in place on account of the pandemic, a direct comparison cannot be made with the original footfall figures collected in December 2008. Now, at that time, we weren't in full lockdown, but there were still clear difficulties, and those issues had been going on for a period of time. So, as we still are aware, there can be a degree of discomfort in people coming together, and a town centre is one of those locations where people will come together and cluster that little bit more. But the surveys undertaken in December 2020 indicated a decrease of nearly 20% on non-market day, so that's footfall, and also a decrease by 33.7% on market day compared to the previous year. So that was the fall. Now, overall, the footfall trend has shown a steady decline over the years, with a more significant drop within this this monitoring period. The reasons behind that are pretty clear, I must say. Moving on then, though, there's some other statistical data there to help in the understanding of how it's impacting on various elements of the town and various measures that have been incorporated since then. So I'll move on to paragraph 2.12. That's looking at employment monitoring. Unfortunately, there's not much to say there, but I think it's still worth noting that showed there's no change in office floor space in the plan area. Paragraph 2.14, there are no sites in the AAP area to have seen housing completions over the last 12 months. Now that actually is quite unusual. There have been over the years a number of housing sites that have come forward. They're not necessarily always on sites that are allocated, but they have been coming forward. So that's to the effect of 358 dwellings having been delivered in the town centre in the 9 years since the plan was adopted, which to my mind is really quite healthy, because that's footfall in itself. So, you know, you need your pint of milk, you need whatever, you will tend to use your local town centre for that purpose because it's just on your doorstep. Moving on then into the cultural quarter and paragraph 2.17. Now this is a good news story. So in addition to there's a project we're aware of called GLAM, the Gallery, Library and Museum. That was set up, and in early 2020, external funding totaling 3 million was secured to support a capital transformation project to GLAM. The council is match funding that with £640,000. Now, the report itself says that an application was due to be determined in January. My understanding is, I think it was the 19th, so maybe last week, an application and may well been a listed building application were approved at committee. And as indicated there, the building is forecast to be completed in 2022. So there's some good news, good prospects for that part of the town centre in the coming period. Moving on then to objective 2, and that's looking at the retail offer. In the last year, there was a net gain of 105 square metres of retail floor space, that being at 5 Gold Street, and it was a change of use from a restaurant cafe use to a retail use. So although there's reduction in footfall, the uses are still in operation. We haven't necessarily yet seen the closure of retail premises. We're aware that there are 1 or 2 national chains that are affected, but it's almost a dormant period, and we will have to see how what happens to Kettering town centre as we climb out of the effects of the pandemic. Then looking at the overall vacancy rate, I'm at paragraph 2.26. So overall vacancy rate in the plan area is 13.36% compared to the national average of 12.4%. That's actually a decrease of nearly 1% on last year's figures. And a report undertaken as part of work for the station quarter indicated that vacancy rates could increase by to 26% nationally following the pandemic. So within that report, there's an air of concern that things may get worse before they get better. But also there's a bit of a message there around seeking to respond and anticipate how we need to help to support our town centres so that they come through this in a positive way. And things like the GLAM project are good examples of how we're seeking to achieve that. Then looking at objective 3, to deliver a new residential community. I think I made mention actually, no completions were recorded on sites within that area over the last 12 months. Then objective 4, looking at high quality urban design, architecture and public realm, and respect for heritage. I think there's another piece of good news here, and the council is releasing capital funding and some section 106 funding to match fund a successful bid made to Historic England, England's High Street Heritage Action Zone funding of nearly 1.5 million. The total budget is in the region of 4 million, and that's helping to regenerate a vibrant place for local businesses and visitors. So that really is a marker, I think, for Kettering, for how it starts to see itself climbing out of the current difficulties for the town centre. Then looking at objective 5, in the past year, there's been no office floor space completions. And then at paragraph 2.41, it reports Kettering will be a key location on the Midland Main Line route, providing an interchange between the intercity and regional services for East Midlands Railway. Now that there's due to be a change to the train timetable in May this year, so that's the time that we'll start to see an increased offer in terms of an additional service for Kettering, hopefully, and that'll be another opportunity for a boost for the area. Then looking at objective 6, a safe and welcoming, walkable town centre. Work involving signage has been identified to improve wayfinding for pedestrians and cyclists. Now, I'm pretty sure I've seen some photographs that indicate that those have now been installed. And if that's the case, my look at the photographs was that it really looked quite smart and helps to give a sense of place and a sense of identity and steer people around in using the town centre. In addition to that, there's been the installation of 12 electric vehicle charging points within the council's car parks. Further, I think good news actually at 2.45, the council, along with the county council, has launched, and Voi, I think it is, has launched a trial e-scooter opportunity, and the take-up has been really good. So it's been reported that initial take-up in Kettering has been very successful, and as a result, an additional 30 e-scooters were added, and this supplemented by 20 e-bikes. So given the season we're in, I think that's really good news, and you would hope that with fine weather that will increase further. So there's some positives there. Moving on to objective 7, a green town centre. So there's the reminder there at paragraph 2.58 of 12 electric vehicle charging points in the car parks. So it's a contribution to go to demonstrate the green credentials and ambitions for the council. Then looking at the Heritage Action Zone, this funding can assist with repairing historic buildings and restoring shop fronts, as well as stimulating commercial investment. The total value is forecast to be over 4.3 million. Now, I'm involved in some of those meetings. The interest in take-up has been very positive at this really quite early stage. So I'm quite hopeful that in any future reports to committee, we're able to identify a little bit more on which historic buildings those are. And we'll start to see the benefits in front of us as these units become more attractive and to people using the town centre, visiting the town centre, and potentially investors wishing to occupy those important units. So with that, I'll draw a line under that and move on to the recommendation, Chair. I would like to however, point out one or two of the bullet points there. And I think an error, bullet point 2 refers to overall vacancy rates have increased, and I think really it should be has decreased to 13.36%. I'd also highlight that the significant decrease in footfall. Moving to the bottom of that page refers to work is ongoing to progress the High Street Heritage Action Zone. The introduction of a trial for e-scooter scheme appears to be successful, and the council has installed 12 electric vehicle charging points in its car parks. I'm happy to take any questions or comments, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Just one question. We're not going through the detailed appendix area, are we, as well?
Wasn't necessarily proposing to, Chair. I think there may be quite a bit of doubling up, but there is some further background information within there that adds to the context and contents of the report.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from the members, please? Got one. Okay, we'll take Ash first and then Jan.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, clearly, COVID is the big sort of elephant in the room, really. I mean, it's a national, international issue, and we are going to see a permanent change in the high street from that. And it's making sure we embrace that change. So obviously with retail across the board, that's in decline. We were looking even at Rushden Lakes, they've lost quite a few of their units as well. But actually, I think we've got a really good story to tell in Kettering. People are still investing. Perhaps they're not investing in the traditional high street retail, but we just need to make sure that we're out there with a good marketing case. So as we move to unitary, we're getting this inward investment, particularly with Glam, you know, getting visitors to visit. I'd really like to see that become hopefully a regional destination if we can get the big attractions, the sort of the exhibitions and what have you that we've had before. It's also really interesting to see the developments on the station quarter again as that returns hopefully to normal service. We'll hopefully see a lot more people visiting the town centre, which is where the signposting will hopefully help with that investment. Really looking forward to the Heritage Action Zone. And again, it's making sure with how we sort of attract that to inward investment, it's having an attractive, compelling case for businesses to invest. And that links in with Rochelle's team with sort of regard to economic development. To just restore that footfall, hopefully, perhaps slightly differently. So people might not be coming into town for clothes, but they come in for events, they come in for art, food, drink, you know, it's just making sure it's still attractive. And actually also interesting to see the investment. Clearly the Voi considered there's a good business case to have the bikes in Kettering. Just one question, Simon, it'd be good to see if there's any long-term monitoring of how that affects footfall. So areas where perhaps there's points vehicle use, how is that helping people is that leading to an increase in certain areas? So people pop the bike on the pavement, nip in for a quick bite at Delhi Block, for example. Just as an example, it'd be really useful to see that monitoring. So we know that investment from Voi is helping to spread that across the high street. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
May I respond?
Please come back.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. I mean, Voi, the information that the scooters provide is really quite thorough. I think they monitor every mile and every route and where the real activity is, and it gives the opportunity then also to improve or enhance various locations for pickup and drop-off points. So I think it certainly does. I think it makes sense for us to continue to use that as a useful indicator for us. If we're indicating footfall, why not indicate other forms of movement?
I think it would be good if the scooters or bikes were also located, I'm not sure if they are, down at the railway station, so that people could pick them up there and go straight through to Wicksteeds Park when the weather is better. Jan, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I did. I mean, Simon
Sorry, James, you can come in first and then.
Sorry, I was trying to get your attention, Chair, and I'm sure Simon will kind of make the point. It's really important because this information will also feed through into the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So, you know, all of that information will show how the people get about the town, both on bikes and walking and through the e-scooters, and how we can improve, you know, better infrastructure in terms of improved accessibility for those going forward. So what we want to do is to have a plan, you know, from the LC WIP to ensure that we can get further investment to enhance those kind of routes. Sorry, Simon, for stealing your thunder, if I have.
Jan, you wanted to make a comment.
I didn't know whether Simon wanted to finish what he was going to say.
Did Simon want to come back in?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I was only going to say I am aware that discussions have been taking place with the East Midlands Railway, so aligning it with some improvements for cycling provision itself at the station, and discussions are also advanced, I think, with Kettering General Hospital as a location as well. So yes, we're looking that they're collectively looking to expand the receptors, the visitor locations, and improve the offer at those locations.
Okay, Jan, floor is yours.
To be honest, Simon's kind of said what I was going to ask about. It was really interesting to hear the scooters and obviously the bikes now. But I think the information we can gather from them, because they're also using telematics and they can track exactly where they are, they can set up geofences so they can tell when people are going in and out. So if they're going to certain restaurants, what I wanted to ask is that with these hotspots, if you like, of where people are travelling to most frequently and at what times of day, because they can track all of that. But when people hire them, do they, because I just haven't, but do they put in their details in terms of, I know they can just their card to hire, can't they? So, but do they, when they register, do they in their name and their birth? It'd just be interesting to see what range is hiring them, because then that might better inform us as to what might work within the town. Because obviously with COVID, many people are now shopping online. We've seen so many shops go out of business. And obviously with going out of the EU, we have the other problem that now some countries won't send goods to us, or they're loading extra charges onto their goods to be able to get through into Britain. So I think now we might see a re-emergence, which will be of shops that are homegrown, if you like. You know, they're local people setting up local businesses, and therefore there might be the requirement to have smaller units, which we've got down in our cultural quarter. And on top of that, we have all the lovely eateries in that area. And I think if you were looking at the scooters and the bikes and where they go to, that might better inform us as to where people are actually going. It might seem that they're not actually going to Newlands and parking the scooters up there, but they're actually going into town because they want to be going in, not at the moment, but the libraries and museums, the culture we have that perhaps Rushden Lakes doesn't have. Yes, you can have a walk around the lake, but essentially you're going there to go, God forbid, and go and do some shopping. You know, that just doesn't appeal to me. It's just so what I'm trying to say is I think it's the history of the town that we have got this grant for, that we can develop. And I think that you've done here and how many shops are there, which is really very skewed this year because of COVID, and indeed last year falls very skewed, you know, and you couldn't really do a proper count because obviously everybody's shielding, etc. But I think these centres are actually informing us a bit of what people are in lockdown and what people are actually wanting. And I think if one thing we have learned immensely from COVID is that people just want to be with each other and enjoy each other. So And I think that's what we will be looking at, not so much shops, but areas where people can congregate and safely and enjoy time together. And I go back to something that I think probably Martin will remember. I always used to say to him, when are we going to get outdoor table tennis tables? Because I think now people are very aware of what they need in life for their mental health and mental well-being. So promote their physical well-being, the two work in symbiosis. And I think it's those kind of things we should look at as well as what shops we've got and what offerings we've got in terms of the museum and the library and what events we put on. Because if you think back to the markets that we've done, like we had the French market, and that footfall then was tremendous. And when we put events on like the cycle racing and things like that, the ambience in the area now would be amazing, and it is amazing and was amazing when we did the cycle race, to have all those restaurants and everything for people to be able to view all that, go and enjoy the fab restaurants. And I just think, you know, we've got an opportunity now to really kickstart Kettering again and develop a new town. You're going into a new unitary council, we've got this money, we've match funded it, and I think we should be proud of what we've achieved, how we've managed to balance our books and get this far. And I think you guys should be proud of the report you've done, you know, to see the way forward and be positive about things. So thank you.
Thank you, Jem. Anyone else wishes to make a comment? Yes, Linda, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of things really. I need to start off here by declaring an interest. It's come to light because I am a member of the Heritage Action Zone Committee, and so I'd just like to put that into the minutes. I'm really pleased to see the scooters and the bikes. That was so innovative for Kettering, I felt, and it's been such a buzz around every age group you can think of. And I don't think I'm wrong in saying that there really hasn't been that many complaints. I know we've had a couple of concerns raised to us as local councillors, but that was more about where have they come from, whose are they, who's responsible if there's an accident. So all very good questions, not actually not complaints about what they were. So, you know, I'm sort of asking, I suppose, maybe we could get out to people via our website some of those frequently answered questions with answers, so that people could just dip in and be looking at that sort of information for themselves. The electric charging points for cars, when you watch the National Drive, I just wonder where or have we got on our agenda to raise those figures, because if you look what they're trying to drive from central government and how quickly they want to get rid of the petrol car and move to all electric, I just feel our charging points are not going to cope. So I'm just wondering, have we got that very firm on the agenda to increase that, so we're not chasing it if and when the dates that are being given out of the complete swap over happen. And I suppose the other two things are just a bit of disappointment really, in our plan we've got about the car parking policy for building in the town centre, enlarging housing sites, generating car clubs, car share spaces. Now I sit on planning, and we're always raising that because we're always pushing cars out into our existing car parks. And at the moment, I can see that that's not an issue. But I feel moving forward, you know, when we come out of the lockdowns and start getting more vibrancy. So I just wonder for that and 2.43, that there's been no cycle parking secured in association with residential development. So I was just wondering, have we got our numbers set too high? You know, is there an opportunity that they could be re-looked at? And maybe, because we know town centre development is going on, but because of the size of our town centre, it does tend to be small development, but has that roll-on and knock-on effect of, no, it itself didn't generate 15, but 3 of them put together generated 15 in a very close area in the town centre. So they're just sort of questions and points, really. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Linda. Does Simon want to take that, or James?
I'm happy to take that, Chair, as he pinched my LC whip aspect. So that in terms of the threshold, I mean, we've got in mind that the plan runs out at some point this year. I remember through the examination, the discussions were around if there are any recessions. Well, there's been a recession and there's been lockdowns, then I assume you would look to extend the period, the inspector said. So, you know, there's a bit of life left in the policies that are contained within the plan, certainly. But we will be looking to, or intending to, review the plan, obviously not under Kettering Borough Council, but in discussions with the other authorities, a town centres document, and Kettering obviously would form a part of that. But we will continue to push to review things like when you're talking about the threshold and going about encouraging more of those sustainable travel facilities in the town centre. In terms of setting new targets and so on, we'll also be commencing during the year the review of the joint core strategy, so the strategic plan. So that will again be on the agenda, and the team are well aware of the climate change push and the need to encourage as well as enforce other forms of travel and movement to support the environment. And then in terms of the complaints, if I say that, yes, I think I keep hearing from various sources that Northampton had all the complaints, and we got the benefit because we worked out how to better handle the issues because of their challenges in Northampton. That's not such a bad thing, and I'm so pleased that that they seem to be going so well at this moment in time, and let's just hope that it continues in that vein, because it could bring a major change to what people are used to and how people get around. So let's hope so. Hopefully that covers the frequently asked questions. I'll feed that back to Greg Ward, who's leading for Kettering on the e-scooters, and see if he can't work some of those up, if he hasn't already got those available, actually. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Jan, you'd like to come back?
Thanks, Chair. Simon, just a quick one. Going back to the scooters, we were looking at, and I don't know if we still are, renewing the pathways, you know, for the bikes and what have you, because obviously all the green has worn off the roads and that, in conjunction with what's going on with the scooters, and if they continue to grow and flourish and be used more frequently. Is there a view that we should be looking at creating more paths? We don't want people being run out. If there is a whole plethora of people who prefer to use this, I mean, I think they're a fab idea. It keeps you out in the fresh air, and you don't have to get on a bus or a mask, and it's keeping away from people, which is what we need, because it's not, the virus isn't moving, it's the people moving it. So if they're on home, they're not going to move it. So I just think if we could look at the cycleways, pathway, to make safe areas so that people can traverse on scooters, etc., and the pedestrian to be safe as well. When you've got little ones around, or you've got older people who are quite not as agile as some people.
Certainly, I think it's something that we can draw into the work on the LC whip. So yes, I think that then makes sense. And yeah, the other message I was going to share was that the government's view at the present time is that they are not wishing to support local authorities unless the transport change is resulting in a reduction of road space. So they're wanting to take road space, not share road space between cars, cycles, and and the likes. Now, whether they'll start to soften that approach, we're yet to see, but they're really quite hard. If they are, then there's seemingly a willingness to go about putting significant funds into supporting those cycle focused projects to get them operating and get them really active. So that's something that we're always after, if it's right for the journey, for the environment, and it's not harming the balance with the economy at the end of the day, perhaps.
Jan, you want a final comment?
Final comment, Simon. That in view, and with my planning hat on, and perhaps I might agree, and maybe I don't know, I'm not actually anymore. When we have planning applications come forward and they come to planning committee, one of the bugbears we have is that there's just not enough parking spaces, paths aren't wide enough to even get a buggy down. So with bear in mind, we've got 5,000 odd houses on East Kettering, then in the future, when planning applications come in, be asking for wider pavements, more parking spaces. We can put scooters there, bikes there, and we don't have the necessity for cars. If the government want to put money into roads, then let's have the wider pavements and have them like they have at the seaside. We have a lovely wide pavement so everybody can stroll, people can get on their bikes, their scooters or their skateboards, whatever it is, and then we can all live harmoniously together forever and ever.
Thank you, Jan. I'm not going to take us through all of the items on the recommendations. Just to note, I think that amongst the gloom, there's some really good news amongst this report. One of the things that I noticed in terms of the railways system, once the new timetable comes in, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, but the frequency at which they will actually be stopping at Luton Airport Terminal is increased on the electric service. At present, not everyone stops there. But I thought that the new timetable, all of the electric service would stop at Luton Airport, and once we get to using the airports again for holidays, that will be a major boon, I would have thought.
Yeah, Chair, I think that has to be the case. Travelling north to south, Kettering will be the last stop before St Pancras. So that's the intercity service in effect. So then the commuter service will come from Corby, travelling south through Kettering, and then has the opportunity to pick up all the stops along the way. So I would quite expect that pretty much it will stop at every station en route into London. So it will improve the service associated with the Luton Airport.
Great. Can we just signify that we note the report and the good news that's in it, please? Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to the next report, which is the housing delivery and 5-year land supply. That's back to Julia. Yes,
that's right.
Okay, over to you, Julia.
Thanks. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on housing delivery and on the council's 5-year housing land supply position. Kettering Borough has a housing requirement of 10,400 dwellings for the period 2011 to 2031, which equates to 520 dwellings a year. This report provides an update on the annual monitoring of completions, the results of the government's housing delivery test, and also the 5-year land supply position for the period 2020-21 to 2024-25. Housing completions are monitored on an annual basis, and in the period 2019-20, 350 dwellings were completed. This is less than the annual requirement, and it's fewer than the completions that we've achieved in recent years. If you have a look at table 1, that sets out the completions for years since 2011, along with a cumulative performance against the Joint Core Strategy requirement. So you can see there that in the last couple of years, figures have been a little bit higher, ranging from 706, 495, 644. So this year we have seen a slight drop on the previous years. Table 2, which is underneath paragraph 2.3, provides details of housing completions on a settlement by settlement basis. And that table also includes the Joint Core Strategy requirement, so you can see sort of level of completions at each settlement compared to the overall requirement. And then the number of affordable homes completed in the 1920 monitoring year was 129, which is 37% of the homes completed. And a list of the homes counted there is included in paragraph 2.4. So moving on to the housing delivery test. In February 2019, the government first published the housing delivery test results. And the delivery test is an annual measurement of housing delivery, and it assesses delivery over the preceding 3 financial years. And it's the measurement's quite important, because if delivery falls below certain points, then there are sanctions within the NPPF which apply. So if your delivery falls below 95%, an authority is required to prepare an action plan. If delivery falls below 85%, authorities need to add a 20% buffer to their 5-year land supply. And if it falls below 75%, the application of the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. You can see in paragraph 2.6, the housing delivery test published for Kettering are set out there. So in 2018, the result was 129%. For the 2019 measurement, 130%. So significantly over the point at which there are any sort of sanctions applied. Paragraph 2.7 advises that the housing delivery test for 2020 would be published in due course, and that it was expected that Kettering Borough wouldn't fall within one of the sanctioned categories. The government have now released the housing delivery test results for 2020, and this showed that Kettering Borough had delivered 103%, and therefore, as anticipated in the report, doesn't fall into any of the categories where the sanctions apply. So that's obviously good news in terms of our housing land supply calculations. So moving on to 5-year land supply, the NPPF requires local authorities to identify and update annually a supply of sites to provide a minimum of 5 years worth of housing against the housing requirements in adopted policies. We've now undertaken an update to the 5-year land supply position for the period 2020-21 to 2024-25. When calculating the 5-year land supply, the NPPF requires that an additional buffer is added to that move forward from later in the plan period. And there are 3 types of buffer: 5% to ensure choice and competition in the market, 10% where the local authority wished to agree an annual position statement, and 20% where there's been significant under-delivery, which is the under-delivery set out in the housing delivery test. The council doesn't intend to prepare an annual position statement, so it's the 5% buffer that is added to the 5-year land supply. Also, when calculating the 5-year land supply, we need to add any shortfall from earlier in the plan period. Table 1 shows that at the current time there's a shortfall of 452 dwellings. So table 4 sets out the Joint Core Strategy requirement, the housing requirement plus the shortfall, and then the housing requirement plus the shortfall plus the 5%, which means that there's the housing requirement is 3,205 dwellings, and that's the figure that's used to calculate the 5-year land supply position. When preparing the supply of deliverable sites, there are a variety of sources which are used to identify sites within that schedule. You can see those are set out in paragraph 2.15, and they include sites with planning permission, allocations, sites where there's a resolution to grant and a windfall allowance. And the NPPF defines what a deliverable site is considered to be. So you can see underneath paragraph 2.16, I've set out the NPPF definition there. And that definition's been used to prepare the site schedule, which is attached at Appendix 1 to the report. And the final column of that site schedule provides a justification for each of the sites' inclusion within that schedule. Table 5 in the report, which is under paragraph 2.18, shows the various sources of supply identified and how many houses are identified from each of those sources. So you can see there that the vast majority of sites included are ones where there's an extant planning permission. And the site schedule attached to Appendix 1 demonstrates the supply for the period 2020 to 25 of 4,214 dwellings. You can see there in Table 6, we've got the housing requirement of 3,205 dwellings, the identified supply of 4,214 dwellings, and that equates to 6.57 years supply. So moving to the recommendation, the recommendation is that members note the update on housing delivery and note the council's 5-year housing land supply position of 6.57 years.
Thank you, Julia. Members, any members wish to comment? Got Jan indicating. Anyone else? Okay, we'll take Jan's comment first.
Thank you for that, Julia. It's a fab report. Just comment really. The way that the government operates with, if we don't meet our housing targets, which I know we've surpassed, so I'm not concerned about it, but it's just a question going forward. The fragility of the market, it was such that, you know, lockdown 1, you couldn't go to work, everybody stayed at home. Lockdown 2 was you can go to work if you can't work from home, but only in certain areas, and one of which was building, but they had to halve, in most cases, the amount of contractors on because of social distancing, etc. And obviously we've now learned from that, and I think there's more contractors go on sites than in lockdown 2. And it almost feels like we're not really in a lockdown in terms of the amount of people that are able to go out to work, because obviously we've all got to feed our families and run our home. And with that in mind, do you think that because of the fragility of the market in terms of loans not being available because people are unsure of their jobs, and also because of the way that we've had to build because of COVID, do you think that's why our house delivery is low by 400 and however many it was, 454 was it, something like that? And would that be an acceptable reason to go to the government without being penalised if it continued this year? And we were concerned for the numbers of houses that have got planning permission but have not yet been built, because if you look at the amount of extant planning permissions, that's quite a high amount compared to what's actually being built, and so therefore would the government brow at that, or is that just me trying to think too far into the future?
Yeah, in terms of the sort of lower figures for this year and the impact of COVID on the 350, I think that was probably not really caused by COVID, because the lockdowns came in towards the end of the monitoring year. And we haven't done a detailed analysis of why the figures are sort of a little bit lower, but I think our feelings are there perhaps two factors. One being some sites that had been delivering sort of quite large numbers coming towards the end, and there just being a slight dip before some other of the larger schemes started on site. And the second being the weather. During the first part of 2020, there was quite, for the first part of sort of 3 or 4 weeks of the year, there were quite a lot of storms, which perhaps would have been impacted on delivery in those months. So that you know, there's potentially a couple of options. In terms of the government's approach to the COVID restrictions, they did make an allowance this year within the housing delivery test to reflect the fact that there was a lockdown in that may have affected part of the figures. So there's a possibility that may well be the case next year, potentially for part of the year. I think the approach has been since the initial lockdown really to get back up to construction back underway, and I think that probably has happened. So I don't think it would be the whole year that was probably affected there, but sort of the earlier period of the lockdown where it was more people were staying at home, and there was a slight period before construction sort of really went back to site. So there's a possibility that there may be an allowance there, as there was at the end of the 2019-20 monitoring year.
Any other comments from around the table? Just one from me. I haven't noticed Rothwell had only 2 last year, but the SUE that's identified there for 700 houses has seen an incredible increase in activity on site over the last 3 to 4 months. So we're going to start to get that SUE really kicking in and helping. James, do you want to add a general comment?
Yeah, Chair, it's amazing how quickly developers, once they get mobilised and on site, they can start knocking out houses. But you know, they won't build if the demand's not there. So I think it goes back to the point of Councillor O'Hara. You know, if there's a slump in the market and mortgages are harder to come by and people are uncertain about moving, then that could affect delivery and how, you know, strong our bounce back in terms of construction is. But you know, in general, I think we've got a fairly strong market in terms of attractiveness as a location to live and work. So, you know, hopefully if there is a dip, the government will take that into account. I mean, I think last time we did lobby the government with the JPDU as well in relation to relaxations for the 5-year supply. But I think, as Julia said, you know, they were more intent on seeing construction come back and not allow, you know, sort of, I suppose, councils to get their foot off the accelerator in terms of delivering growth. So but I think we're in a good place, Chair.
Super, thank you very much indeed. I think it's good that we've got 6.57 years rather than just 5. So we've got quite a bit of slack there, if you like, in terms of protecting. I'll just move straight through to the recommendation. Again, it's one that we note the update and the very healthy situation in which we are. Can you please show that you note it? Thank you. Excellent. We'll move on to our final report now. Item 9, which is the update on neighbourhood planning, and that's back to Simon, or is it? It is Simon.
Chair. Yes,
Okay.
it is. Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update members on the progress with neighbourhood planning. We now have 10 neighbourhood plan groups that have been formed. So if I run through each in turn, so looking first at Broughton neighbourhood plan, that's the neighbourhood plan and the neighbourhood development order that was made or adopted in October 2018. So then moving on to Braybrook, the neighbourhood plan area was designated on the 14th of April last year, and has made progress in the early stages of preparation. The Neighbourhood Plan Group has appointed consultants to assist them in preparing the plan, and a village questionnaire was circulated to obtain views. Themed groups have been set up, and officers will continue to attend monthly meetings to support the preparation of that neighbourhood plan. Then moving on to Desborough. The latest update on Desborough is that work on the Desborough Town Plan has recommenced with a wholesale revision and updating of the pre-submission draft document that was progressed. When would that have been? Just looking at the details there, in 2019. Especially, they're looking especially with regards to the plan's aspirations, links between the vision and policies, and fit with regional and sub-regional policies, and that consultants are being appointed to work with the town council on reigniting that neighbourhood plan. Then moving on to Grafton Underwood, the group has completed a design code and is working with a consultant on the preparation of this plan. Then Great Cransley, the Sturm Group undertook a village questionnaire in 2019, and again 3 theme groups were set up to progress those areas of particular interest from the questionnaire. Officers have provided support to enable them to begin more theme specific tasks, including policy writing. Then looking at Morsley, initial consultation was undertaken, but no further progress has been made since. So I think of the plans, unfortunately, that's the one that has frozen, I suppose, for the time being. Pytchley, in May 2020, a pre-submission version of the plan was provided to officers for comment. The comments were provided, so that now is with the group for further consideration and progression. So that's at quite an advanced stage. Then looking at Rothwell Town Council is revisiting producing a neighbourhood plan, and a meeting took place with, I think it was with Julia recently. Was it last week? Julia, I'm looking for a nod of the head. Yes, it was. Did she come in?
It was last night, actually.
Last night, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So again, that's starting off with intent to make serious progress. Then looking at Southwest Kettering Headlands Community Plan, the forum was redesignated in October last year. The neighbourhood forum will cease to have effect with the creation of the new Kettering Town Council, and it's the forum's intention to progress the neighbourhood plan to examination, moving towards a referendum in May, should COVID restrictions allow these to take place. Officers are currently reviewing an amended version of the plan. So again, that's in quite an advanced stage. Then finally, Harrington, the neighbourhood plan area was designated in September 2019. The group has appointed consultants to assist in the preparation, and initial consultation took place in February 2020 last year through a community questionnaire, and I know that one is active with officers attending meetings to support the group. So with that, the recommendation, Chair, is that members note the update on progress with the various neighbourhood plans throughout the borough.
Thank you, Simon. Any comments from members around the table? I've got 2. I'll take Sedwin first, and then Joan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I ought to declare an interest at this point, because obviously as a member of Rothwell Town Council and the Deputy Mayor, although I don't usually tell most people that. It's just really to thank Julia for last night. It was really useful. This town plan of ours has been hovering in not the foreground and the background for probably the best part of 14 years, I think, as I can remember. So we really need to get to grips with this. And we're going to obviously take the proposition to the next town council meeting in February, but I think we're going to seek the advice of a consultant and go from there. So hopefully we're going to actually make some progress this time. We've got masses of paper. There's been at least 10 people that I know of that have dabbled with it over the years, because everybody thinks it's easy until they get hold of this big load of paper, and then suddenly, you know, they run off beating Usain Bolt out the door. So we're on the case. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to make any promises because you know, but it's certainly at the forefront of for those of us that attended last night, at the forefront of our minds. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Sonia. Jan, you wanted to come back.
Chair,
Yes.
I think I want to say something as well.
Sorry?
I did, Chair, but happy to wait after Jan if you want
Sorry,
to.
Ash, I missed you.
That's right, Jan, if you want to go first. I don't mind.
You. Just a quick question, really. The summative proposals of all of the neighbourhood plans have been agreed, like they will be read in line at the NPPF, and they do hold water. They are imperative that we have these to protect our local area, because it's based, they're written based on great local knowledge but adherence to regulations. My question is, what happens now? Because there used to always be the thing, and actually it says here at 6.1 with the climate change implications, we have to comply with EU regulations or are compatible with EU regulations. And one assumes that that is still going to be the case even post-Brexit. Is that true?
Simon, could you come back on that?
Certainly, yes. My understanding, until there are new regulations that come into force that change those EU regulations, then the intention is that they will remain, and plans will need to adhere to those requirements.
So can I just ask one supplementary to that then? If that's the case, I know if anybody sits on planning, they will know what I always ask is, what's happening to eco-friendly products, what's happening about ground source heat pumps and things like that, and the fact that the government wants us to get rid of our gas central heating and wants these eco-friendly heating products. So, and that has been rolled out in the EU and is very much prevalent in a lot of the Scandinavian countries. If you look at Sweden and the Netherlands especially, adopted so many amazing products that are eco-friendly and are protecting our planet and not destroying it. So with that in mind, will we be looking at within these plans, or can we within these plans be looking at products that will help us to ensure that the builders are now putting in eco products instead of old-fashioned boilers, because they will be old-fashioned, because in 5 years' time the government wants them out of all of our homes, even though it's going to cost, I had mine costed, and it was £11,000 to put an eco boiler in, to put a ground source heat pump in, to retrofit. So if they are fitted from conception of the homes, then the price will go down, because there'll be so many of them produced, and there'll be more engineers who understand how they work, because that's the other biggest problem. Engineers don't understand it. There's not enough people trained in these eco products. But if they're more prevalent and insisted upon, then that might be a way forward. So it's an ask really, that when we're doing these plans, can people please look at them and say, actually, we want to make sure we've got more eco products within those plans.
Thank you. Simon, have you got a comment?
Certainly, yes. Can I say noted? Yeah. But yes, I totally understand. Northamptonshire, Northamptonshire sorts through the joint core strategy to support that approach and push the boundaries, but we found ourselves constrained by national policy. So really, we need to turn to the government, look for a loosening of that approach, or rather than say a loosening, look for a pushing against that to strengthen the guidance there, so that it enables us to respond in the way that you talk about, and that really there's a willingness and a keenness to follow. So that would be my approach. There's continuous conversations along those lines, and there's all the talk around building regulations and coming at it in that way. But we need for the national level to give us the allowance to incorporate those policies at a local level.
A personal view, I think that building regulations need changing to require it, and then it will happen. Ash, you wanted to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just really to say how pleased I am to see how this list has expanded ever since my time on planning policy, which is probably 5 years or so. And it's just great to see local empowered people, passionate people standing up. It's true localism in planning that we want to see. Obviously, we've got Simon and Julia on hand to guide as required, which is great, and hope that continues. But do completely agree with Jan's point about the green agenda, making sure we embed sustainability and good products, good energy products into local plans, neighbourhood plans. And we do actually have the Task and Finish group currently for climate change at the North Northants Shadow, which I sit on. So we've discussed a lot of planning related issues and more to come. So hopefully that might play a part in that to shape as we move to unitary. But yeah, brilliant work. Keep up the good work and hope that these communities reach the outcomes they wish to achieve. Thanks.
Thank you, Ash. Any final comments from Simon?
None from me, Chair. I saw James was waving his hand, flittering between whether he was going to say something or not.
I was. I mean, I just reiterate Simon's kind of point that the building regulations is so the future home standards is going to be embedded into the I think it's Part L of the building regulations, but that's been a long time coming. So the government probably needs to get on and try to do that. And I think there's some discourse, amongst the sector in terms of whether or not that's the right thing to be doing and whether or not that's actually going to be the most effective way of trying to reduce emissions from buildings, from the built environment. That and transport are the two big things to tackle now with because the government's done a very good job in terms of decarbonising the electricity supply, through renewables, but transport and the built environment. And we need to get to the point where we've got different build methods. So you've got very tight, airtight design. And yeah, we just need to get on with it, and the government needs to show the direction, I think. And because we're leading on the climate change conference in November, I think there will be impetus for that to happen. So watch this space.
Thank you for that. I'm not going to let you back, Jan, at this time. Sorry, I know it's one of your favourite subjects. We'd just move straight through to the recommendation at this stage, please. Can you just show your hand by hand that you support it? Excellent, I think that's unanimous. At which point, there's no other items on the agenda. Thank you all very much for attending, and we look forward to having a date announced fairly soon for the point where we can re-examine the Part 2 and then hopefully agree to take it forward for the final consultation. Thank you very much.